When you dare to share, you break the silence. When you dare to share, you speak your truth. When you dare to share, you use the full strength of your voice. When you dare to share, it brings opportunity to own your story. So tell it, be heard, and at the same time, your sharing is someone else's learning, inspiration, motivation, empowerment, and hope. There's always an element to each of our stories that remains a secret. For some, we feel it's a dirty little secret. Dare to share your untold story exposes these secrets in a welcoming and positive way. I encourage each of you out there to dare yourself to share what is yours to tell. When we dare, it is the courage to do something really important. Let this be a vow to each and every single one of us that we take risk, we brave, confront, and face what is, while inspiring and empowering all communities. So let's break that silence and tap into mental beauty. This is Salima Jadavji, your podcast host, a practicing clinical social worker, and your mental wellness connoisseur. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast, episode number 16. Getting There, an inner knowing despite the repressed and uncovered memory. To all my fellow listeners, before we get started, I'm just dropping in a note to give you a heads up that this podcast might be emotionally triggering for you. We do invite guests onto the show who share openly about extremely difficult life moments with exposure and impact of what the struggles have been like. The intensity of each episode could have a variable impact on your emotional and mental well-being based on your own personal story. If at any point the topic becomes uncomfortable or upsetting to you in any way, please do not pressure yourself to listen. Instead, be kind to yourself, do some self-care, and perhaps give another episode a try. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing our guest, Ross Taylor. Ross is from Burlington, Ontario. He is a father to a 4-month-old son and married to an incredibly supportive wife. Professionally, he's worked in corporate health and wellness sector for the past 11 years, just recently taking a new role to help lead and implement a mental health strategy at Sobeys. Ross has lived with depression since before he even knew what it was. He joins us to talk about how mental illness has impacted his journey through struggles to the greatest successes of his life. Hey, Ross, welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast.
Hi, Salima. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
My goodness, I'm excited to speak with you today as well. I'm honestly just super excited to have you on the show. And of course, I'm very thankful that you bring with you this willingness to share and you showing your support, taking a stance with me to help break barriers of mental stigma.
Thanks so much. And I mean, I can't give you enough credit for what you're doing. You're moving this industry forward and this movement forward. It's so well needed. And to be honest, you kind of helped push me into this a little bit as well, which was, I'm extremely thankful for.
I'm really glad that you're here. And in case you're still wondering, in case parts of the podcast is a bit of a mystery to you, this podcast is about bringing forward untold stories that people go through, whether directly about a mental health struggle or something else. And something that we know is that no matter the story, there is impact on someone's own mental health in some way, which remains unseen or tucked away. So this platform serves as a way to break these barriers of mental stigma that have been conditioned in our society. So together with our conversation today, I hope it's really about encouraging people to share and tell what people typically have reservations for expressing. And so, of course, I'm bringing forward this new trend. It's called the mental beauty rethink. What do you think, Ross?
I like it. I mean, I think I've had to just rethink the way I look at my life and the way I look at my experiences so many times. It really resonates with me.
All right. You ready for my questions?
All set. Let's go.
It's going to be great. Okay. Ross, give us the newspaper headline of how you would title your untold story.
Yeah, I think if I had to put a newspaper headline on it, it would be something along the lines of From Half Empty to Half Full.
Okay. And so what does this headline mean to you, from half empty to half full?
It really means just taking perspective of my life and taking perspective of the experiences I've had, and just reframing them and looking at them in a different way. I mean, I could take some of the moments of my life and be really upset about them or be really down about them. But to be honest, and this may sound cliched or corny, but, they've all led me to where I am today. They've led me to a really happy, healthy life, an incredible family, and something I'm just really grateful for.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's also your perspective too, right? Like, it's one's perspective on life and which perspective you're going to stand in and which perspective you're going to own. And I can see now, after you explained what this means to you, how that might unfold in your story. So why don't we segue there? Tell us what your untold story is all about. Share with me the who's, the what's, the when's, the where's of your story.
Yeah, happy to. And really, my story involves mental health and involves depression, and it really, I don't really know where it starts, to be honest. I don't really know exactly when you would say I was inflicted with this, or where it started, where it began. As far back as what I've been told, and this is something I don't remember. So as far as we go as untold stories, it was a little bit untold to me too.
Okay.
When I was 5 years old, my father was arrested for a white-collar crime just outside of Toronto. And apparently when he was arrested, and actually like the police came to our house to arrest him, I was the only one home. I have a couple older brothers who are incredible. I've got a mother who's just amazing, but none of them were home at the time. So it was just my father and I. And I have other memories of that time living in that house, things that happened to me in that house around that time, but I have absolutely no memory of that day or what happened that day, or seeing my dad arrested, seeing me being walked to the neighbor's house for someone to take care of me. And I have absolutely no recollection of it whatsoever. What really came up after that was I developed a speech impediment not too long later. So, some of the ums and ahs that you'll hear in this podcast aren't just that. They're me also dealing with the kind of lifelong speech impediment that I've developed and apparently didn't have before that moment.
Well, I have lots of ums and ahs that I say here today. So I've been told I say lots of ums and ahs. So
and that's really where kind of the journey for me begins regarding mental health. I don't think I knew until I was probably in my late 20s that what I was dealing with was depression. And whether I dealt with it before that day when I was 5 years old or after, I'm not sure. As a kid, I would deal with tension and disappointment and sadness in a way that was pretty unproductive. I would rip up baseball cards and break toys that I had, and I had no idea that what I was doing, this was kind of my way of coping. I really didn't realize until I got older and until I was kind of pushed into it from a few kind of relationships that I'd had with friends and romantic partners that, there was something deeper here, and there was something that I really needed to get some support with. And that's kind of like the journey that I was on and am still on today. I say this, and hearing a story about my dad being arrested right in front of me is definitely a traumatic experience for any little kid, and certainly for me, but it's really turned into this whole journey. It's turned into something that I've found to be able to spin into a career and a career path and a life and a way to be open and honest with partners and friends. And it's still a journey I'm on. I'm not the most open person with friends all the time or family members. And it's something that I've learned to deal with kind of throughout my life.
Right. And, it sounds like you did the best that you could. I mean, it sounds like when you're telling me about, the acting out physically, like destroying your belongings, like your toys or your baseball cards and those things, that it's like a way of regulating your emotions. You really didn't know what you were experiencing, and there was so much pent up and you needed an outlet.
Exactly. And I didn't know what that was until I was older and a little bit more educated on it and actually sought out and got some support. And to be honest, was pushed into that support. So when we talk again about dare to share, I was kind of dared to get support. It really was. And sometimes out of necessity and finding a way to regulate emotions and finding a way to do it in a healthier manner is something that I've struggled with my whole life, but that I've really been helped with.
I'm curious, Ross, what sorts of emotions did you experience when you recognized now that you were trying to find your own way to cope and regulate all of what was going on internally? Would you say there was confusion or sadness, or was there other emotions involved?
Confusion, yeah, sadness, of course. Self-blame was one that really came up. It was always, it's almost to a fault. I always try to look at a situation as never to blame someone else, even when they're obviously the one that, if we need to put fault on something, is at fault. It's
Right.
always the way I look at things. It's always, what could I have done differently? How could I have fixed that? How could
Right.
I have done something differently? And meanwhile, I'm 6, 7, 8 years old. I can't help that my father's got financial problems, or that it's kind of destroying our household kind of over the
Right.
course of my life. But that is the feeling that came, that I learned, was sadness, absolutely, but self-blame, self-hate might be too strong of a word, but certainly just an excessive feeling of, why is this, what did I do?
Right. And I can't imagine if you were 6 or 7 years old, what that was doing to the inside of you. Like, just you described this thought process of what self-blame looked like and what you were blaming yourself for. I think that must have been quite a toll for you, being so little and enduring like the whole weight on your shoulders, right? This is a really big weight.
Yeah, it was. And it was something that I had to learn to find ways to cope with, and learn to find outlets to release it. And some of them were productive and some of them weren't. And ripping up my baseball cards, it's kind of not the most productive way to deal with your feelings. I found other outlets. I found sports. I found, to this day, everyone will say, oh, Ross likes sports more than anyone they've, more than most people they've met. My wife would surely tell you that. She would like anything else on the TV right now than sports. But I think it's ingrained into me that, as a child, the only place I felt confident and felt like I was in complete control of what I was doing was playing baseball. And as an adult, the only place I feel like, maybe for some reason, the only place I feel comfortable, sometimes the only place, or my outlet, my way of coping, is flipping on a sporting event, flipping on a baseball game or a basketball game, and understanding that there's something I can control here, even though I'm not even the one playing anymore.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up the idea of control, right? We're always seeming to strive for feeling that sense of control, but sometimes when we're striving for control, what is it that we're really doing, right?
Exactly.
Right. So, Ross, tell me more about how you were affected, having gone through learning that this repressed memory was there, and, the beginnings of learning that, oh, this is depression that I have. Yeah, how were you affected?
Ashamed. How could this happen to me? This isn't the
Right.
Ross that I know. Even though I was, for the most part, a shy kid, certainly at school, and obviously a lot of it because of speech impediment and not wanting to speak up at school. But I was a high performer. I did really well in school. I excelled athletically. I couldn't believe that this was happening to me. I couldn't believe that I was this, honestly, before I knew that this was incorrect language, that I was this weak, that I was this
Right.
flawed, that I was this different than everybody else. And that's the overwhelming feeling that I think I had for, until I really kind of sought out and understood kind of, well, what I needed to do and what kind of treatment and support I needed.
Right. It sounds like the way you describe this, there was like the silos thinking. There's Ross, who's a high achiever, super sporty person, and you can achieve and attain results and do well. And then there was like this part of you, this hidden part. Then there's this Ross that has this mental health situation going on here. So this doesn't match. It's almost like you were seeing them in silos and saying, well, I don't know how this connects. How does these two things connect? This is like polar opposite, right? How does this connect?
Yeah, it didn't add up. It didn't logically make sense. I've always thought very logically and thought kind of in as many black and white terms as I can. Although I'm learning, being in the mental wellness industry, there's a lot of gray, and I think that just, it didn't add up to me. It didn't add up that how could I be so good at these things and yet have this one thing that I didn't know how to and couldn't figure out how to shake.
Yeah, it's so unfamiliar, and it's because we don't talk about it. So it becomes that much more unfamiliar. And when you talk about the shame, feeling ashamed, I attribute that to, how some of our society is conditioned. I mean, of course, we've made a lot of progress to date. And certainly during the pandemic year, there's been a crack in to kind of explore more and be more open to things. But how long ago was it that you got your diagnosis?
It's about 10 years ago,
Okay.
give or take.
Okay. And so you were in your 20s at the time?
Correct.
Okay, right. So even in 10 years, I know that there's been a drastic shift in mental health and the acceptance of mental health. However, I feel like we've just, kind of surfaced just a small part with a bit of a ways to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're so far further ahead than we were 10, 15, 20 years ago. But
Right.
you're right. It's an awkward conversation. It is.
Yeah.
I mean, I hesitated to be on this podcast. My title at work has mental health in the title. And yet there's still that hesitation. There's still that something out there that,
Right.
why can't we talk about this like we talk about a broken leg or like cancer?
Exactly.
How are we going to get there? Because it's I think just when you take something away from people that they can't see or feel or touch, it's still a little unknown. And it's still a little, I don't know if we'll ever fully get there. Similar to the way we might not fully get there with some of the other kind of social justice movements or whatnot, but we need to keep moving in that right direction.
Yes. As long as there's movement, then we're making progress, then we're taking steps that we need to take. So Ross, I'm curious. Now I know that when you learned of your diagnosis, you were just trying to figure out, how does this piece fit in my life when everything else is so good, as you mentioned. But was there a point after you digested that you allowed yourself to take a step back and say, this actually makes sense now?
Yeah, it took a little time though. It wasn't right away. I got diagnosed with depression when I was, in my mid-20s, and spent a year taking an antidepressant, and vowed on the first day that I started taking it that I was not going to be someone who had to take antidepressants for the rest of their life, that this wasn't, I didn't need this, and this was for somebody else, and I just need this. Okay, it's a little stopgap measure to get me to the next point. And I did. It took it for a year. I went off of it and stopped seeing a counselor, stopped doing all the things that I needed to do. And the truth is, it's not something that I just need for a little bit of time. It's something that I'm probably going to deal with for the rest of my life. And it took me probably 3 or 4 more years to decide to go back and to get more support and to go back on an antidepressant, which I take now daily, which in the grand scheme of things, it's one pill a morning and it takes me 2 seconds to take, and it's not a big deal. I think about it like having a Flintstone vitamin when I was a kid.
Right.
Right?
Oh, Flintstone vitamins. Right.
And it's even for whether I was more woke to mental health 10 years ago than some or not. And I think that's the first time I've ever used the word woke out loud. Or it was something that took me some time, and took me some time to even share with family, friends,
right,
etc. And even still, I'm sure there's some people that'll hear this that are like, wow, I know Ross really well. I never knew this.
Yeah. It's a secret.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it, right? So I want to know if it's okay to ask. So before you knew it was depression, so before you got this diagnosis, did you at some point decide did you not decide, but at some point did it occur to you that, okay, something different is happening to me, so, I got to do something? So my question here is, how did you know something different was happening? What were you noticing?
Behaviors, just periods of almost lethargicness, just difficulty getting out of bed, difficulty being motivated, almost like going through swings of being motivated versus not. And honestly, I got pushed into it. I got some help from my now wife and from previous relationships I had before her, and was really kind of pushed into getting that support. But really, it was just noticing outbursts and things like that were coming up. They were more frequent. Anger over insignificant things.
Okay. So people were noticing. People like your heart connections, people in your world were noticing that, okay, we got to encourage Ross to get some help. Like there's some things that he needs to explore.
Absolutely. Family usually knows, if you're close enough to them, and I wouldn't say we have the closest family in the world, but we're close enough. And they knew something was going on. They knew
Mm-hmm.
something was off every now and then, that Ross probably needed some support.
Mm-hmm.
Friends, relationships, absolutely. They all
Mm-hmm.
knew, and it was, I think the person has to be ready. I think the
Mm-hmm.
person has to be ready to have that conversation, and to be mature enough to take the next steps.
Right. And so, Ross, a few minutes ago, you were talking about the idea of, your belief system about when you did learn that, okay, this is depression that I have. And you talked about this idea of like, well, this is like me being or feeling weak. And we can associate that with, living in a stigmatized world when it comes to mental health, right? So when that happened and the resistance that you experienced, at what point did the resistance lift? Like how did you get to the point of acceptance? Like I know you got there, but how did you get there?
It took time, and it
Mm-hmm.
took opening up and
Mm-hmm.
sharing with a few people, maybe it was one person at a time,
Mm-hmm.
close friends, family members.
Mm-hmm.
What really helped was sharing with people.
Mm-hmm.
Again, dare to share, and
Right.
it was really daring myself to share with one or two people at a time. And what I usually tell people, and what anyone who's struggling or anyone who's looking for support, be it reactively or proactively, is people are so much better people than we give them credit for.
Mm-hmm.
We're so bombarded, especially nowadays, with social media, with anger, with hatred, with divisiveness. When you actually open up to someone, be it a friend, a family member, a colleague,
Mm-hmm.
boss, whoever, 99% of people are amazing. They're good
Right.
people. They listen, they can relate. They've either dealt with something, or they know someone who has, or they have a family member or a friend.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone's flawed, and everyone has things. And that sense of peer support, camaraderie, shared experience, we're in this together,
Mm-hmm.
helps. It
Right.
sounds again. It can sound cheesy, and it can sound corny, but it's not. It's the truth. It's
Yeah, I don't think it's cheesy or corny. I think it comes down to the simplicity of it just takes connecting to someone. It just takes that one step. And it seems like from what you've been describing, you've gone from that place of your beliefs and your thoughts and having them like two Rosses, right? Ross in silos 1 and in silos 2. And it seems like when you're sharing about how you got there to the place of acceptance, when I asked, the giving it time and opening up and sharing, it's almost like that's how you were able to merge all of Ross. This is Ross taking care of himself. This is all parts of Ross, with health and wellness and all the other parts.
Yeah, you're right. I don't know if I ever looked at it that way, but you're right. Kind of silo one and silo two kind of merge together to be,
Yeah.
one kind of whole being here, and really, um, I think I say it a different way, but it means the same thing. This is all come together to make me the person I want to be, and the person I get to be both at home and at work now.
It's all synchronized now. So Ross, when people come to see me in the therapy room, these individuals are typically in one of three places. So some people, when they come to see me, they're just getting started with an area that they want to sort of dive into. Some are in the middle, and some are looking back, ready to, fly and go somewhere else. So for yourself, what part of the journey would you say that you're in? Would you say that you're looking back? Are you in the middle, or are you getting started?
I think in the middle.
Okay.
I think we're all constantly changing and evolving, and going through different things, and having challenges, and building our own resilience, and
Mm-hmm.
and having our battery drained and charged and back and
Mm-hmm.
forth. And I think we're all in the middle of some sort of a journey through life. And hopefully we're only just beginning, with a lot of things that I still want to get done with my life, and where I am with mental health,
Mm-hmm.
and affecting some change. I can tell you that my hair is certainly on the downside of that journey, but for the rest, I really hope I'm somewhere in the middle, and just really looking forward to what's ahead, because I just
Right.
feel like I'm in such a place of self-awareness.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so now that you're in this place of self-awareness, what do you want to remember about the process of your healing journey? Yes, I know you're in the middle in terms of when you talk about in the journey of life, But in the middle of this untold part of your story, what do you want to remember about the process of your healing?
I don't really want to sound like a broken record at all, but I want for people to believe in people close to them.
Mm-hmm.
People closest to you are closest to you for a reason. They're there to support you, and that's what I think I forgot at certain points throughout my journey.
Mm-hmm.
Was that people who cared about me the most are the ones you're also sometimes the most shy of. Sometimes it's easy to share with a stranger.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's easier to share with someone you don't know as well because you don't
Mm-hmm.
have that history with them. But
Right.
giving people credit, and that's what I needed to do more of my whole life.
So that's what you want to remember, is being able to believe in people, giving people credit.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Having that outlet to share, knowing that there is an outlet.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely. There's always another place to turn. There's always someone there to support you.
Mm-hmm. So, Ross, what would you say that you're grateful for, having been on this journey of your untold story, as you've come to terms with the depression and this memory, even though it's not recalled, this memory that started it all, the memory that was told to you, and just coming to terms with this depression? What are you grateful for?
I would say I'm grateful for the incredible family I have around me, which
Mm-hmm.
includes the family I was born into and the family I've chosen with my wife and son. The family I was born into kept me safe, kept me healthy. Might have been a little bit of bad luck along the way with watching my dad get arrested when I was 5. But
Mm-hmm.
you know what? Other than that, the family that I was born into, brothers, mother, now sisters-in-law, and nephews, are just absolutely incredible people who are more supportive than I ever could have imagined, and that's really what I'm the most grateful for.
Mm-hmm. And now it's made you also pursue a career in helping other people. And clearly you're making a difference in the lives of many people in the work that you do.
Thank you. I really hope so, and that's really the intention. We got a long way to go.
One step at a time, my friend. So, in terms of your untold story, I know we've been talking a lot about the impacts and different aspects, but when we talk about the effects on your mental health, is there anything else that you would like to share in terms of how your untold story affected your mental health? Like maybe things that you were scared about, or things that showed up, or any particular things that were part of the journey?
Yeah, sure. There's lots of things along the way.
Mm-hmm.
We probably don't have enough time in this podcast to share them all, but really, there's lots of things, and it's interesting. It all kind of comes back to a fear of letting myself down and letting others down. It
Mm-hmm.
was, obviously it started when I was young, and then as a high performer, really all my kind of journey through mental health came to a head 5 or 6 years before I was even diagnosed with depression, and it was really during my second year of university.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, I was a high performer. Never really had to try that hard at school. I just knew the answers. I
Wow.
could do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, second year of university, I stopped talking to my father. I unfortunately lost a niece, and I had a long term, one of those high school relationships that's going to last forever. I
Mm-hmm.
had one of those that ended,
Right.
and just wasn't mature enough to realize that I was really just only beginning my, adult, relationship part of life, and
Right.
really just hit a wall with education and with whatnot, and stopped trying at school, and also got to the point where I just couldn't quite, you know, it didn't come quite as easily to me as it did previously. And I
Mm-hmm.
ended up dropping out of university after a few years. I ended up really just, going to a place of, living, you probably hear a 20-year-old now saying living my best life, but, going to a place of just partying all the time, enjoying my
Right.
life, drinking, having a
Mm-hmm.
good time with friends, not worrying about finances,
Mm-hmm.
spending more than I had, and really dug myself into an actual tangible hole that I had to get out of, which
Right.
was really just a way of coping. It was really a way of suppressing emotions. And it was
Mm-hmm.
really a way of, and it took a long time to get out of it. It took a long time to actually physically get out of, financial debt. And from an education standpoint, it's still being worked on. But
Mm-hmm.
I think the one thing I would say is, people, I've heard this before from others who are struggling, is that oh, it's so bad, I might as well not even try.
Mm.
Oh, I'm in so much trouble, I might as well not even try to get out of this
Mm-hmm.
or whatnot. And it's not the end goal that makes you feel better.
Mm-hmm.
It's the day you start taking positive steps.
Mm-hmm.
It's the day you start taking the right steps forward with your life, the day you decide to share with one other person, the day you decide to, not go out drinking with your buddies today because you can't afford it,
Right.
or not doing something. It's the day, that's when you immediately start feeling better. It's not at the end of the journey when you've fixed everything, if that's what you think you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's the first step you take. You'd be amazed at how quickly you start feeling better.
Yeah. It always starts with the first step, that first action, the first thing that you choose to do differently, and then focusing on that process. Because you're right. It's there's one thing is to have an idea of what the end goal is. But got to focus
Mm-hmm.
on what's happening right in front of you. And it starts with the first choice, the first decision to do something different.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So, knowing all of this that you know now, what is your key message to the listeners of our show?
You don't have to be brave enough to share it with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
You just need to be brave enough to share it with one person.
Right.
And it almost doesn't matter who that is. Friend, family member, support person of some kind, reaching out to whatever supports are available to you through the community or through your workplace or wherever. You just have to be brave enough to share it once.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like that you said that. Just be brave to share it with one person. As long as it's that one person that you're comfortable with, you just start with one person. So, I'm curious, Ross, about what is your game changer inspiration that's close to you that reflects your untold story? So, what I mean by this is there like an inspirational quote or a book or something that speaks to you?
Yeah, I think I go kind of like I do with fitness programs and fitness apps and stuff. I kind of change every once in a while and I go for different ones. The two that kind of stick out to me, one is a poem called Thinking,
Mm-hmm.
which I encourage everyone to look up. It's all about believing in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And the second one, and the one that kind of comes up daily in life now, is be the change you want to see.
Mm-hmm.
Is really just listening to that Gandhi quote. We can only really affect what we do and how we react and how we behave. And if you want to see some change, be it yourself first.
Mm-hmm. You know, Ross, I have a mug that's sitting on my desk right now in front of me, and it has the same Gandhi quote. It says exactly what you just said, be the change you wish to see in the world. And interestingly, I have some random snippets around my office, and one that's just a little reach away here is the same poem, Thinking, by Walter Wintle. And so if you like, I can read it out for the readers. I mean, not the readers, the listeners.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay. So it's titled Thinking. If you think you are beaten, you are. If you think you dare not, you don't. If you'd like to win, but you think you can't, it is almost a cinch that you won't. If you think you'll lose, you're lost. For out of the world we find success begins with a fellow's will. It's all in the state of mind. If you think you're outclassed, you are. If you've got to think high to rise, you've got to be sure of yourself before you can ever win the prize. Life's battles don't always go to the stronger or faster man, but sooner or later, the man who wins is the one who thinks he can. Walter Wintle.
Thanks for reading that out. I think that's the first time I heard it read out loud to me since I was 9 years old and playing on a baseball team. And somehow that's always stuck with me.
Yeah, I'm glad that it was helpful for you to hear it too. Yeah, I have this folder that has a bunch of things that, clients have given me. People have told me about their inspiration and if they're available, and they just seem to sit on my desk. So this one was here along with my mug that has the other quote on it. So that was pretty cool that they're both here. So thank you for sharing that. And so maybe you can tell me, what is a cause or an organization that has been impactful to you on your journey that perhaps you'd like to give a shout out to?
Yeah, I'm happy to give a shout out. I just left a workplace that I spent the first 10 and a half years of kind of my adult career at.
Mm-hmm.
And it's called Warno Chappelle, which is actually about to change their name to LifeWorks. And what they did for me in my career and my journey was something that I probably won't ever be able to thank the people there enough for. There's incredible people there. And to be honest, and since I left there, I don't have to be ashamed of this. I didn't know what the company did on the way to the job interview 11 years ago. And I fell in love with the industry and the people and everything that they do. And in that organization and working in that organization, what it taught me changed everything for me.
And for our listeners, can you share a little bit about what are some of the things that they do?
Yeah, sure. So Morna Chappelle, or soon to be LifeWorks, is an HR consulting firm. It's one of the biggest ones in Canada. They provide employee assistance programs, absence management services, and retirement solutions this to some of the largest organizations across the country.
Right. Excellent. So Ross, your story was very raw and very real and very authentic. And so I can only imagine that there might be people who may want to connect with you when they listen to this episode. So if that happens, how is it possible? What are you comfortable with in terms of people reaching out to you? How are you findable?
Yeah, I'm not that hard to find. You can find me on LinkedIn or on Twitter. Twitter handle is the Ross Taylor. Not that Ross Taylor was taken, and obviously that wasn't the one, so I had to write one. But those are kind of the main two social media channels that you can find me on, and I'm happy to connect with anyone, honestly, from any walk of life. And if anyone wants to talk about this topic, I've always got time to chat. And with a 4-month-old, I'm often up at 3:00 in the morning. So if that's the time they want to chat, I'll be probably wide awake and ready to go.
All right, one more time in case I cut you off while you were sharing. Your Twitter handle
is the Ross Taylor.
And LinkedIn?
Just search for Ross Taylor and you'll find me.
And what happens if someone wants to shoot an email to you? Would you be okay with that?
Yeah, absolutely. It is rosstaylor85@gmail.com.
rosstaylor85@gmail.com. Okay, amazing. Ross, you just dared yourself to share. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Salima, for doing this. You're changing the world with this podcast. And this is, again, goes back to that Gandhi quote. This is how we do it.
This is how we do it. So now that you just dared yourself to share, tell me, how was this experience for you?
Liberating.
Liberating,
and it feels great.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you got to get pushed into it, and I've been pushed into sharing with people most of my life, but it's funny. You feel better after.
It's really therapeutic. And I do hope that you listen to this episode as well once it's released. Absolutely.
I can't wait.
So Ross, I would like to share my appreciation for your willingness to dare, to share, and to tell. It feels like you really didn't leave anything off the tables. You really showed up with so much realism and genuineness. Like, it's incredible. And today you did that difficult thing of trusting your own process. So that level of vulnerability definitely gets an applaud at the very least.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you, Ross, for being a part of Dare to Share Your Untold Story and helping to be a voice in breaking down the barriers of mental stigma. To all of our listeners, if you like what you've been hearing on this podcast and you want to be part of breaking down barriers of mental stigma, I invite you to go wherever you are listening to the episode and hit subscribe. Leave us a comment or a review of the episode and maybe how you relate to it. To learn more about what we offer, visit www.daretoheal.co. And if you are feeling ready and brave to share, please submit your story by visiting www.daretoshare.co. Thanks for joining in.